Hi, I'm Anne, and I'm here because yesterday I had a talk with a British woman about the term colorwork. She told me that she didn't know the term colorwork at all. She had been knitting for 35 years, and I asked her, okay, what would you call it instead? And she told me Fair Isle. She's right, in a way. Fair Isle is colorwork, absolutely. However, there are so much other knitting which is colorwork, but that is not Fair Isle. They are in the same category of colorwork, but they're not Fair Isle, right? For example, Norwegian knitting, traditional Norwegian knitting, which I do, is not Fair Isle, but it is colorwork. When I started to learn to knit in English 1 year ago, I had been knitting in Norwegian. Knitting in Norwegian and knitting in English are the same but two different things. I've been knitting in Norwegian for 35 years already, so when I started last year to do my knitting and teaching in English, I had to learn all the terminology all over again in a new language. I already spoke quite okay English, so I had a head start in a way, but learning to knit in English was quite a process. And the reason why is because there are so many terms that they're not equivalent in a way. Of course they are, they convey the same meaning, but if you do translate them directly, it doesn't make sense. I have briefly talked about this before, and I'm probably going to talk about it again, but here is an example for you. The English word for pattern is in Norwegian called mønster. And the Norwegian word mønster is in Norwegian the same word for knitting patterns and food recipes. So what happens is that if you, for example, do a Norwegian text and you go into Google Translate it, and to translate it, you get a text coming back not about knitting patterns but about recipes. The result is that you get a text, because this is not the only word that will come back wrong. The result is that you get a text which is in fact quite confusing, because there are so many words in there that are not given quite right when it's translated like that. When you keep doing this for some time, you get into challenges with certain words. And one of those words are colorwork or Fair Isle or whatever you choose to call it. In Norwegian, we call it pattern knitting. And everyone knows that that is colorwork a la traditional knitting. Fair Isle is colorwork, as I said. However, Fair Isle is not the same as Norwegian knitting. There are or Icelandic knitting for that matter, or Peruvian or Swedish or whatever. It's a different. Colorwork is an umbrella term for all those different knittings. The techniques are obviously the same in a sense. I mean, we're using 2 or more colors and we're making patterns and beautiful patterns out of it in different colors. But colorwork also comprises knitting with 2 colors, but where you do only 1 color at a time, like intarsia or stripes and that kind of thing. So when I found out all this, based on this, I had to decide what terminology to use when I talked about Norwegian knitting and my patterns. I didn't really want to narrow it down to Norwegian knitting only, even if that is my main focus. But I wanted to talk to about that kind of knitting in general. As Norwegian traditional knitting, as I said again and again, isn't Fair Isle. I decided I couldn't use the term Fair Isle because there are 2 different things, and I'll get back to that later. My courses, my videos, my tutorials, my posts, everything, my inspirations, everything is adaptable to all kinds of colorwork with 2 colors in 1 row. But I needed to find a word that is more generic. After some searching, I found 2 terms. I found colorwork and I found stranded knitting. Stranded knitting is a term which is totally correct. But you know what? There are people doing our knitting without doing it stranded. They actually don't strand when they do that, our kind of knitting, this kind of knitting. And there is also another drawback with that word, and that is that the word itself, stranded, is kind of scary for people who don't know what it's all about. So if they don't know it, because you know it's offish, isn't it? To have a stranded means you're lost somewhere, right? And talk about lost knitting isn't, you know, the biggest confidence boost builder, you know. And my goal and aim is to try to introduce Norwegian knitting and colorwork to as many of you as possible, and that includes people that really don't know much about Norwegian knitting or colorwork at all, right? So using the word stranded, I was advised after testing it out against using. People told me don't use that word, okay? So we stopped using that word, and that left me with one word, and that is colorwork. I could of course call it Norwegian knitting, but that narrows it down too much. Obviously, as I said, I am all into Norwegian traditional knitting, but I want to reach out a bit wider and then narrow it down afterwards. So after a lot of thinking, back and forth, the term was colorwork. So it turns out that wasn't plain sailing either, and that's this video from me to you, trying to sort out the differences here. Point is, whether you are knitting Fair Isle, Peruvian, Intage, Norwegian or whatever, as long as there's more than 2 colors involved at a certain point, is colorwork. And my colorwork is Norwegian. So if you stay tuned later this week, there'll pop up a video for you where I show you the differences between Fair Isle, Icelandic, Norwegian, Greenland knitting is also a bit different. So you get a short geography lesson in the Nordics versus Scandinavia, and the differences between the different knitting from the different areas. Okay, so that's for watching. I hope that made the colorwork and the Fair Isle and the Norwegian knitting a bit more clearer. See you soon, and if you want to get more of my knitting hacks and you know, fun facts, click that follow button and you're on. See you later.